Good morning, everybody. We'll call the meeting to order. Council is conducting this meeting in person and via conference call in accordance with the Municipal Government Act, Section 199. Council chambers is open for public attendance in person. However, councillors and members of the public may still join meetings remotely using our current teleconference process. If you've submitted a comment request that has been received by administration, the chair will call on you at the appropriate time. If the meeting is recessed, callers will be put on hold until the meeting reconvenes, with the exception at noon where callers will be asked to call back in. This helps with call quality. Please note this meeting is being recorded and may be uploaded to our website and/or social media. To eliminate background noise, please mute your phone during the meeting. We also ask all attendees to mute their devices to reduce disruptions to the meeting. Everyone has a right to be present at council meetings and council committee meetings. Any attendees that are considered disruptive to the progression of this meeting may be removed at the discretion of the chair as per the Municipal Government Act, Section 198. We thank you for your cooperation and understanding. We have an agenda before us. Does anybody have any additions or changes? Councillor Laverson.
Number 7.3 should be removed from the agenda. The notice of motion was not brought up at the last meeting according to procedure. And the Reeve lied about something when she disparaged me at that meeting about the same issue.
Can you indicate the procedural issue with the motion, Councillor Laverson?
Yep, just a minute. I'll have to look it up. Okay. And of course, I can't find it when I want to find it. Notice of motions need to be done in writing. I'm still looking it up. Be easier if there was a search on this thing. Maybe the CAO can look up notice of motion in the procedure bylaw and read it.
Through the chair, notice of motion bylaw, or the notice of motion in the procedure bylaws, paragraph 94 to 98.
Okay, number 95. A notice of motion must include the complete, precise text of the motion to be considered, the date of the council meeting, which the motion will be made, purpose and background. Motion is precisely stated in a notice of motion. So there was no written notice of motion. And 98, where possible, a member should pursue all other avenues to advance the matter. And then there's the matter of lying.
If you could speak up, Councillor Laverson, I can't hear you.
Which part didn't you hear?
Whatever you muttered at the end.
I said, and then there's the part about lying.
Okay, so can you indicate where in the procedure bylaw it indicates it needs to be a written motion, notice of motion?
I just did.
I don't see that in the procedure bylaw.
Complete, precise text. Text is not spoken.
So I think that's a matter of interpretation. There is a procedural, I guess, there is a procedure where if you believe the notice of motion was presented incorrectly at the last meeting, it could be presented at this meeting with a request for a waive of waiving notice to address the matter at the same meeting, which would continue to include it on the agenda. That's under section 97 of the procedure bylaw. I'm also not sure that previous notices of motion have even remotely followed the procedure bylaw to the letter, and council has permitted them to proceed. Our procedure bylaw is council's responsibility, and we use it as a tool to ensure the efficient addressing of council business. I guess you could put a motion on the floor to amend the agenda. And then if you want to address what you are alleging I lied about at the last council meeting, if you could please elaborate.
Sure, I can get, maybe we should take a little recess and I will provide the parts of the videotape to the CAO and they can play it for us so that there'll be no question.
If you want to just indicate what the issue is, we can start there. I'm assuming if you're raising it during a council meeting, you're prepared to speak to it.
Yep.
Thank you.
On December 3rd at 2:56 of the meeting, 2 hours and 56 minutes, Reeve Link said, "It shouldn't surprise me that you," meaning me, "brought it back in front of me again," or maybe she said it for the meeting again. Either way, it wasn't me, which can be verified at 2 hours, 11 minutes and 50 seconds of the November 12th meeting in the following discussion. So why don't we just get that stuff and play it?
Does council feel the need to recess? We were all in the meeting. The recording is publicly available. I do recall the statement and I will retract that it was you that brought it up. I'm happy to retract that statement. I wasn't in the council meeting where it was brought forward again for council consideration. So I will retract the statement. That was my error. Do you wish to make a motion to remove that from the agenda?
Yes.
The notice of motion. Okay, can you make a motion, please?
Move that I have already said that we need to remove 7.3 from the agenda.
Is there any questions or discussion on that motion? Councillor Kester, if you can use your microphone, please.
Thank you. Just wait here, got the date on, I think it was in October. November 12th, council meeting. There was a notice of motion presented. 2.1. And the notice of motion included motion 1, motion 2, all the writing, background, purpose, 1 page, 2 pages, 3 pages, 3 pages. And that was in, as I said, November 12th, notice of motion made by the Reeve.
Can you just elaborate on your point or the relevance to the motion that's on the floor, Councillor Kester?
That's prior precedent.
Yeah, that's certainly one. That was a notice of motion that I brought forward, and there was certainly precise text and the rationale, and I did do my level best to follow the procedure bylaw, but I think we could find other examples of notices of motion, I'm recalling potentially by yourself even, that were brought forward verbally, where during the meeting where the notice of motion was provided, from my recollection, precise text was not provided, and that was provided at the next meeting when council was considering notice of motion.
I believe when I wanted to do the notice of motion, the CAO wrote it up and it was presented at the next meeting as a notice of motion. And then we carried on at the next meeting with it. I can't remember that date.
Okay, we'll go to
But
Councillor.
it took 3 minutes.
We're going to go to Councillor Laprise and then we can.
3 meetings to get that motion on the floor.
We'll go to Councillor Laprise and then we can go back to Councillor Lawerson.
So my thoughts on this is just that the intent of the procedure bylaw is to provide the information in advance of the meeting that we are going to debate it. And by having it in this package, we received the package on Thursday, so we've had, and it's public, it's on the system. Like, I think we're splitting hairs a little bit. I appreciate that it doesn't probably follow the letter of the law of the procedure bylaw, but I think the intent is met. So I don't know. I think we should just, I think we should proceed with it, because otherwise we just proceed with it next time. What difference does it make?
Councillor Laverson.
Just because we haven't followed a procedure before doesn't mean that that gives us the right to not follow it again.
Another consideration with this notice of motion is it is a different notice of motion than previous notices of motion. This was not bringing forward a new matter. And so let me just check our agenda. So I believe what was indicated during the meeting was that it was a notice of motion to reconsider. So the precise text of the motion would be the precise text of the motion that we are reconsidering, which all of council would have already had. It was in the council agenda package in the minutes that we were approving that day, if I recall correctly. And so this is a little bit distinct in that we're not contemplating a new matter. This is something that was already previous, the motion was already previously presented to council. If I had been chairing that day, and I believe Deputy Reeve Clausen indicated he had tried to communicate this to council as well, the motion likely should have been ruled out of order in that it is not in alignment with the bylaws for the foundation. And so I'm not sure that council has, well, from my understanding, council did not have authority to pass this motion. And so this is a matter of correcting that. So we do have a motion on the floor. Any other questions or discussion? So I would contend that the precise wording of the motion would have been available to council as part of the minutes that we were approving that day, because it is a notice of motion to reconsider. Had it been a new matter, I do agree with you. I think we should, as much as possible, align ourselves with the procedure bylaw. And I think we all have been working hard to follow it and improve our governance practices at council. And I certainly agree with that. Any other questions or discussion? I'll call the question.
Just hold it here. We're voting on to remove the notice of motion.
The motion is on our screens right here. Yes, it's to remove item 7.3, notice of motion to notice to reconsider from the agenda. So a vote in favor would be removing agenda item 7.3. And that motion is lost. I'm sorry, Councillor Laverson.
Talking to myself, there's nothing in the procedure that says I can't talk to myself.
I would ask that all comments go through the chair, please, with your microphone on.
You can show me where it says I can't talk to myself, I will do so.
If you could please use your microphone, Councillor Laverson.
There is nothing in the procedures that say I can't talk to myself, so let it go.
Councillor Laverson, we reviewed this during the last meeting, and it clearly indicates in our procedure bylaw, which this council has approved, and we have committed to follow, that all comments will go through the chair. I would ask that you please align your behavior with our procedure bylaw.
If I am making a comment, I will put it through the chair.
Thank you, Councillor Laverson. Any other additions or changes to the agenda?
Just through administration. So there was 2 deletions and an addition. So the first addition is the Strathmore Ag Society request for a letter of support. That one just came in just this week, actually, and it's just urgent because they need to get that over to the Minister of Agriculture for their proposed build. So we're proposing to put that one under 7.9. And then there's 2 deletions. So we're hoping to delete the radio communication system status, just gathering some more information. So we're just not ready to present our report to council. And that's for a closed session item. And then also we're looking to delete, have a deletion of 7.2, and that was just a duplication of 7.1. Thank you.
Thank you, CAO Henderson. I also have a request for an addition to ratify attendance for the Reeve at a press conference last week. And I would request that we, sorry, put my agenda away, that we add that under agenda 7.9. Oh, yeah, 7.10, you bet, thank you. Any other additions or deletions? If not, a motion to approve the agenda as amended?
So moved.
Deputy Rick Clausen, thank you. Any questions or discussion? I'll call the question. That motion is carried. Does anybody have any notices of motion today? New notices of motion? We'll move to agenda item 3.1. Good morning.
Good morning. Taylor Felt with the county's Planning and Development Services team, here to present bylaw 2024-03. This application proposes to close and dispose of an undeveloped road allowance within Block 2, Plan 550 AM, and in the hamlet of Chancellor. Following the public hearing and first reading of the bylaw in June, Alberta Transportation and Economic Corridors granted ministerial approval. Now the bylaw is back before council today for consideration of second and third reading. I'll briefly recap the application here. The application was made by the owners of lots 1 through 11 and lots 26 through 39, which are all owned by the same person. These are the lands immediately south and west of the undeveloped laneway, which I have up on the screen here. The intent is to purchase the lands and consolidate them with the adjacent properties. Through the circulation process, administration heard from the owner of lots 12 to 25, who has expressed interest in purchasing and consolidating a portion of the laneway with their lands as well. If the bylaw receives third and final reading today, the two owners have agreed in principle as to how the lands will be divided and consolidated. Legal and physical access to those lots adjacent to Block 2 will not be impacted by the proposed closure. The closure doesn't conflict with any statutory or non-statutory plans, and this laneway allowance does not or has not been identified in the county's road construction plan and is not required as part of the future road network. Notice of the application was circulated to adjacent landowners and utility providers prior to the public hearing. No easements were requested by utility providers. One letter of objection was received prior to the public hearing, a copy of which can be reviewed on page 15 of the agenda package. And with that, administration is recommending that council move second and third reading of bylaw 2024-03. That concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Council's wishes.
I'll move that council moves second reading of bylaw 2024-03, this being a bylaw for the purpose of closing to public travel and creating title for a plus or minus 0.12 hectare portion of public roadway described as Area A in Block 2, Plan 550 AM within Southwest 35, 24, 21 west of the 4th, as shown on the attached Schedule A, forming part of this bylaw.
Thank you, Councillor Laprise. Any questions or discussion? I'll call the question. And that motion is carried. Council's wishes?
I'll move third and final reading.
Thank you, Councillor Kester. Any questions or discussion? I'll call the question. And that motion is carried. We'll move to agenda item 3.2. Thank you. Good morning.
Morning, Council. Joel from administration here. Quickly present this next agenda item. So this is the Goldfinch Raw Water Borrowing Bylaw. The recent successful and approved tender for the Goldfinch Raw Water Line was approved on December 3rd, 2024 for a total of $9.75 million. This is the first reading for the borrowing bylaw that will provide a substantial portion of the funding to construct this asset in 2025. Following approval, the advertising period will commence as required by the Municipal Government Act. This borrowing bylaw and value falls well within the capacity of the county under the MGA. And just as a note that we reviewed during our budget process, the current debt limit is calculated in the 2023 audit year was around $52 million. That concludes the presentation. Administration is available for any questions.
Thank you. Council's wishes.
I'll move that council approve first reading of the Goldfinch Raw Water Line Borrowing Bylaw 2024-07.
Thank you, Councillor Bigger. Any questions or discussion? Councillor Kester.
I'm thinking when your staff look up rates and stuff, when it comes back to council, there'd be a synopsis of how we expect to pay this back. The loan, where we get the money from and whatnot.
Yeah, through the chair. So that would just be through general taxation. Debt payments are a requirement of the MGA to be included in the budget on an annual basis.
Will that include any endeavors to assist other companies that we're going to sell this water? We're just not going to tax the Wheatland County for this water for certain individuals to gain water, are we?
Councillor Kester, on page 19, under the division county-wide part of the report, it indicates repayment methods as the loan. For the loan include revenue generation through levies and fees from users, which will help recover principal and interest costs.
Exactly. That's what I'm thinking. When we have the presentation on the borrowing bylaw, that information will be included in it. How we expect to pay it back through levies and.
Yeah, we can certainly do that. We'll have to update our fee schedule as well. This is literally just for the borrowing. Administration at one point did present council kind of a break-even schedule on the return on investment on this one as well. And that was assuming that we had no other customers to tap into this line. And what we'll do is we'll update that one as well because we're using preliminary costing that now we have the actual costing that should come back on this line. So we'll bring that back to council at a future date.
Much appreciated. And I'm thinking when we are borrowing this much money, we will probably have a public hearing on it.
Through the chair, administration was not intending to hold a public hearing on it, just as it's not required for this type of bylaw. So the requirements for a borrowing bylaw would be to have first reading, then advertise for 2 consecutive weeks, which is kind of why we're getting it done in December, so we can advertise over the closure and the break, so we hit that requirement. There's a 30-day window for a petition as well. So if administration does receive a petition on this borrowing bylaw, then we would have to notify council regardless. So we're just gonna follow the procedure that's outlined in the MGA.
So what's a petition? Is that just any individual having comments on it, or?
So there's specific requirements for a petition that are in the Municipal Government Act. I don't know them off the top of my head. I can certainly get that for you at the break or send it to all of council after. And the reason is that the first reading, providing first reading wouldn't necessarily impact a petition, because the petition would have to go on after the advertising anyways. So yeah, the section I can probably pull up in a couple of minutes, but I can send that to all of council.
Okay. Don't think I'm making myself clear. I'm not worried about council so much as the ratepayers. How are they going to find out what the application is? I just put a little context in this. Last time we did a borrowing bylaw, it was in my division before anybody else was here. We did not hold a public hearing, and we ended up having a meeting in Rosebud to explain ourselves. And I said I would never, ever be party to another borrowing bylaw without a public hearing. So I'm thinking when I bring up the motion that we have a public hearing on this bylaw, if it doesn't pass, I want to have them, when this goes into the package for the residents to read, they know how they can come up with a petition, call it. Okay, I want all the information posted with this bylaw. So if somebody's interested in doing it, they would know how to do it.
Yes, so through the chair for sure, no problem at all. So I guess how people will be informed of this is that through the advertising requirements. So that would be advertised. We'll advertise on our website, social media as well, and in the newspaper. So everyone should be able to take a look at it. As for the petition side, we can certainly just look that up and move forward with that. The last borrowing bylaw that I think I was a part of was the one for the Hazard seed cleaning plant. We'd done a borrowing bylaw for that one, advertised it, kind of sent out. We didn't get anything back. I think we may have done another one as well. I just can't remember off the top of my head, but.
Marigold Library.
Oh, the Marigold Library one, yeah. And again, didn't hear any feedback from that one either, but that's okay. We'll definitely follow the MGA requirements, and if council wants to hold a public hearing on the matter, then council can certainly do that as well. It's really up to the will of council. Thank you.
Any other questions or discussion? I'll call the question. That motion is carried. We will move to agenda item 5, our consent agenda.
Excuse me.
Yes, Councillor Kester.
I'd like to make a motion that we hold a public hearing for this borrowing bylaw before we do second and third readings. If nobody comes, it doesn't take up any time, and if there are interested parties, they'll have the opportunity to come speak. I think it's something this large that covers the whole county. There might be interest. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. We want to be open and transparent. I think this is a good way to move forward.
Does administration need a moment to, do we need the motion to include the date and time for the public hearing, or just that we will be scheduling one?
So administration would need a date and time for the public hearing to be scheduled, just so we can advertise it. And then because this would be an optional public hearing, we'd also just need to understand the advertising, how council would like us to advertise this one. So with various public hearings, sometimes we'll just do a circulation notice within a certain range of people within, say, like a land use change is a good example, where sometimes another example would be the electoral boundary bylaw change. So we actually did a mail out to the whole county on that one. So everyone in the county received that. So administration would just need direction on, if this does pass, on how to advertise it. If it's just virtually through word of mouth, if mailouts are required, we just would need some direction on that. Thank you.
I would suggest that we would advertise it in the same way you're going to put it out for the 2 weeks notice for that's part of, because this bylaw affects every ratepayer in the county. Every ratepayer should have, it shouldn't be just for that area. And 2 weeks notice, it's the only way they're going to find out. Put it in the paper, for me, that would be okay, unless somebody in council, that gives them 2 weeks. It's the same notice that we're required to make on a borrowing bylaw for people to do a petition.
So just for clarity from administration, do we need this motion to indicate a date?
Unless council would direct administration to set the date, then you can leave it with administration. That would be the only other thing. And just another point, just to all of council, is that the petition rules for just general petitions in the MGA is under section 219, starts on section 219.
Any other questions or discussion? Councillor Laprise.
Just a question to administration. This won't affect our ability to meet our target deadline for, so.
Through the chair, no, it wouldn't. We don't know the draws of payments yet. We've definitely already made some payments on pre-engineering and stuff like that, but just, you can probably still make it work.
Any other questions or discussion on the motion? So at this point, the motion, I believe, should be amended either to direct administration to, the council direct administration to schedule a public hearing. Would that meet?
I'll accept that.
Yeah, through the chair, that should be fine. Administration can work with that and set a time and date.
Okay. Deputy Reeve Clausen.
I have no problem supporting this. To be transparent, I really hope people are engaged and realize, what we're doing and have the information out there, because we've received it at council several times, but the public doesn't always get it. I get where you're coming from. So definitely to do that. And if we get a good turnout, that's good. We can explain it. If there isn't any, that's fine too. It's something that we're thoroughly aware of what we're doing, but the public may not be, so I have no problem with that.
Any other questions or discussion? I'll call the question. That motion is carried. We'll now move to agenda item 5, consent agenda. Council's wishes.
I'm going to move to remove the library annual report from the consent agenda and add it under item 6.1 for discussion.
Any questions on that motion or discussion?
Sorry, I didn't hear it.
Library, yeah.
Councillor Laprise has moved to remove agenda item 5.6, the Gleason and District Library Annual Report, and move it to agenda item 6.1, business arising from consent agenda. I'll call the question. That motion is carried. Council's wishes for the remainder of the consent agenda.
Sorry, I misunderstood that.
Oh.
I thought it was for the consent agenda, with a given that that was removed.
Oh,
That was just a motion to remove that from the consent. Okay.
Yes. Councillor Laprise.
so I'll move that we approve the December 17, 2024 consent agenda as amended.
Any questions or discussion? I'll call the question. Oh, okay. Motion is carried. My apologies, we're having a little technical error and it's not popping up on the screen there. Let's move to agenda item 6.1.
So I just wanted to bring this forward, just for discussion, honestly. I noticed they mentioned about that they had a sewer backup and that county helped them out, and I'm really grateful that they were able to do that. They're worried that this could happen again, and I just want to talk about what options they might have to. Are the sewer issues in Gleason as bad as they sort of outline, and would the county? I don't want to have sort of scope creep on our budget. That's one thing, but just hoping to have a discussion about what are possible solutions if there is a problem.
I wonder if you would consider a motion directing administration to bring a report back about just about the matter, like the issue, the probability of future issues, potential costs for remedying, and then perhaps bring some options or considerations on our, like, regarding our current funding agreements and arrangements, those types of things.
Okay. I will make a motion to direct administration to provide a report of the potential cost and opinion on the likelihood of future issues, as well as potential solutions that could be considered.
Approximate remediation costs.
Potential cost, I said, yep.
Oh, perfect. Okay, thank you.
Did you get that? Potential cost and opinion. Yeah.
So the motion is on our screens that council direct administration to bring back a report of the potential costs and opinion on the likelihood of future issues and potential solutions. Maybe let's just add on regarding wastewater issues at the Gleason Library. We know what we're talking about, but.
You're right. When it's on the resolution tracker, sometimes these motions are hard to remember what it was about.
Councillor Kester.
Question, this building is owned by the county?
Through the chair, I believe that's correct. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure you're right. I'm thinking the library board should be reimbursed for their $483 too that they spent in cleaning it up for their share in it. Right from the very start, I'm thinking maybe the owner of the building should be notified of problems.
Councillor Kester, would you consider perhaps or working with Councillor Laprise an amendment to include the report addressing potential reimbursement of costs to date?
I'd accept that as a friendly amendment.
We could do a second, looking to administration, we could do a second motion too, but
Yeah, I think that that a motion would just be a friendly one, just as Councillor Kester is asking for more clarity in that motion for something to be included in the report. I think that's totally fine if it's just in one.
okay. If nobody objects, and okay, we'll just give administration a moment. To bring back a report of the potential costs and opinion on the likelihood of future issues and potential solutions. Additionally, consideration of reimbursement for costs to date regarding wastewater issues at the Gleason Library. Does that capture Councillor Kester? Perfect. The motion is on our screens. Any questions or discussion? I'll call the question. That motion is carried. I also just wanted to congratulate the library on page 43, the Gleason and District Library, it indicates has now been running for 141 years. As well, I thought for the size of the community, the circulation of materials at the library, it's really impressive given the resource constraints that they work with. I think that's phenomenal impact in the community to have the resources within that Marigold Library system available to the community in Gleason. So congratulations to their board and to their staff and everybody that contributes to the library. We will move to agenda item 7.1. I had brought this forward to council previously, the concept of this, and this is just following up so that we can ensure that we have a motion in time or a resolution in time to meet the deadlines for the RMA district and the RMA convention deadlines. So essentially, through some work with the University of Calgary, we've identified that students from rural Alberta face several challenges and barriers when accessing post-secondary education. Some of these include things like geographic isolation, financial constraints, limited access to information and resources, internet connectivity and technological barriers, cultural and social isolation, transportation challenges, academic preparation, perceptions and expectations, and lack of role models and mentorship. And so this is essentially asking the government of Alberta to consider developing a rural pathway for students to balance some of those barriers and challenges to accessing post-secondary education. So what I'm requesting is that we direct administration to, and I'm happy to provide information from the work with the university, draft a resolution enhancing access to post-secondary education for rural Alberta students to be presented to the District 2 meeting, like submitted and presented at the District 2 meeting, and to request that one of our neighboring municipalities second that resolution. So I'll make that motion. Are there any, and I'll just give administration a moment. Are there any questions or discussion on the motion? Councillor Kester.
Are we talking about distance for transportation and the need for accommodations? Say somebody wants to go to university, go to Calgary, they pretty well have to go to residence.
That is one of the factors that contributes to the financial barriers. And it is different, as you indicated, for rural students, because if you live in an urban setting in close proximity to a post-secondary institute, it is possible, depending on the age of students, but to live in their current residence either with, if they're a young person with parents, or to stay in their current residence if they're an adult student or independent student. Whereas rural students, whether you're a young person or a mature student, often you do have that necessity of relocating and essentially creating a second residence in closer proximity to the post-secondary. So that's certainly one of the factors.
So with this rural Alberta, would that include other municipalities that are urban that have same distance? So rural would be a certain radius outside of an institution?
So I think we would leave some of that up to the provincial government. It's always an interesting discussion on how to define rural Alberta, different funding streams or different grant programs, different things. There's different contexts when you're discussing that. I think for this, there would be considerations for what we might consider an urban, a village or a town that doesn't have post-secondary access in a relatively close proximity to that municipality. But I think the government of Alberta, as they're developing that rural pathway and the considerations for it and the best ways to support those rural students, could take that into consideration. But I don't think that this would preclude those smaller and more rural and remote, quote unquote, urban municipalities. And there was a representative from Alberta municipalities engaged in this work as well. And there may be a resolution also going to Alberta municipalities as well.
It would be nice if you could share the same resolution.
Yeah, it does. It can provide strength where the positions are aligned on a matter. Yeah. Any other questions or discussion? Thank you for asking that, Councillor Kester. Any other questions or discussion? So the motion is up on our screens that Council direct administration to draft a resolution enhancing access to post-secondary education for rural Alberta students to be presented to the District 2 meeting and request that one of our neighboring municipalities second that resolution. Any final questions? I'll call the question. That motion is carried. We'll move to agenda item 7.3.
So I just brought this forward because I did see that we had passed a motion that was contrary to the Drumheller Area Health Foundation bylaws. So it was an error for us to have made that motion, so I would like to reconsider it.
I'm just pulling up the procedure bylaw for a motion to reconsider just to ensure that we are, actually I think administration, you included it right in the report actually, I think.
Through the chair, motions to reconsider is on paragraph 173. Yeah.
I see it on page 49 of our council report. So if a motion to reconsider is moved, so Councillor Laprise, you're making that motion?
Yes, I am.
I will open debate on the original motion. Councillor Kester.
I would think that this is a bylaw for the Drumheller Area Society. I think what we should do as a county that appointed somebody to it, because we got a comment back from them, how many people are on the board. Remember that letter? They didn't mention anything. I think it would be prudent for us to write a letter to that board explaining what we did. And now we realize we're in contravention of your bylaw, and have them discern the matter and say, hey, yeah, that's against or not, or they accept. That's up to them. It's their bylaw. I think that would be the first step. And then we can go by their comments, and then we can follow up.
Can I?
Councillor.
Did you want to say something?
No, I was just going to ask if there was any other questions or
Oh, okay.
discussion.
I like that idea, but I think that we should write a letter letting them know that we're potentially rescinding our motion because of what the bylaw states. And if they choose to change their bylaws, then we could go ahead and reconsider, or not reconsider it again. I know you're not allowed to do that, but I guess it would be at our next organization meeting. We could have more understanding of what we're actually like to follow their bylaws. It's up to them to change their bylaws so that we can be compliant, I think. But it would be good to send them a letter just so that they know that this is what is happening, and if they choose to change it, then they can.
I would think, for me, the way I would do it in the transparency, we would have a motion to reconsider tabled pending the outcome of your answer. That way they determine. And if they change their bylaw, fine, that's up to them. And if they want to keep it, then we would say sorry. When we carry out the motion, we'd send them another letter, say sorry, we didn't know it at the time. But I would keep it open and above board and let them make the decision instead of we jumping in and making a decision, because it's not our bylaw.
So I think I'm going to just let this motion stand, because I do feel like we need to respect their bylaw as it stands now. We can let them decide whether they want to make a change or not.
Any other questions or discussion, Deputy Ruth Clausen?
Yeah, as the one that chaired the meeting at the time, I remember, and I should have been more, I guess, backed it up a little more, but in their membership, it does say one member, and we had already appointed one. I tried to make that clear at the time, but it just didn't come through right. So we should be following the bylaws of other things that how they ask. It was in the information package, so we can correct it. If they decide to put more than one member on there, that will open up the discussion again at some point in the future, but I don't want to have them solely focus on this going forward. It was our error.
Any other questions or discussion? I'll call the question. So just to clarify, we are voting on the original motion to appoint Councillor Laursen to the Drumheller Area Health Foundation.
1 second. I
I
think
believe that's what the procedure bylaw indicates, is that we're basically after the debate is closed, the chair calls for a vote on the original motion. So we are voting on to appoint Councillor Laursen to the Drumheller Area Health Foundation Committee for the remainder of the term with paid per diem and mileage. Are you able to reset the vote so that there's clarity on what folks, it's the part that council reconsider, I think, that might have been causing. So I don't think that would be part of the motion. So we're now voting on the original motion from the previous meeting. Is everybody clear on the motion? Yes, and now we're following the procedure bylaw, which under a motion to reconsider. Yes. So if a motion to reconsider, this is under section 173 of the procedure bylaw. If a motion to reconsider, oh, sorry, that's if it's in the same meeting. Let me just. The member moving a motion to reconsider must have voted on the prevailing side, except in the case, in which case any member who voted may have the motion to reconsider. I do believe when you're reconsidering a motion, because 174 says the same motion can only be reconsidered once during the same meeting, and a motion to reconsider cannot be reconsidered.
I understand that you have to have a motion to reconsider.
Yeah, so that we have that motion, and now we're just discussing what the motion is. So I believe a motion to reconsider would be reconsidering the original motion, as long as we're all clear
Can
on
I
that.
vote again?
Yeah, that's what we were saying. Do we need to take a break and confirm?
Yeah, could we just take a break for
Yeah.
5 minutes?
It's probably not bad timing anyways. It's 9:56. Let's reconvene at 10:01. Good morning. We'll call the meeting back to order. Thank you to administration for clarifying. So we are first going to we are going to consider a motion to reconsider. So administration has two motions up on our screen. The first motion that Councillor Laprise has moved is that council reconsider resolution number CM 2024-11-50. So this will just be essentially to consider the reconsideration. Is that clear? Yes, exactly. Yeah. Yes. So to consider whether council will be reconsidering the original motion. Any questions or discussion? Is everybody clear? Are there any questions? And I apologize for the confusion.
My vote stands.
Okay, I will call the question if there's no further discussion. The first motion to reconsider the resolution. That motion is carried. So now council will be reconsidering that motion. And so the motion, do we need somebody to make the motion, or does it revert to who made the motion the first time?
Through the chair, I think it was clear in the notice of motion. So the notice of motion stand, but Councillor Laprise should make that motion. Thank you.
Okay.
Or maybe just speak to the notice of motion.
We just need to get this motion on the floor for the second vote.
I'll move to appoint Councillor Larson to the Drumheller Area Health Foundation Committee for the remainder of the 2024-2025 term with paid per diem and mileage.
Thank you, Councillor Laprise. Any questions or discussion on the motion? Councillor Kester.
I guess it's a hard motion because we've already appointed them. But in light of seeing the bylaws, I have a hard time going against the bylaws. So I think I still think it's prudent for staff to address a letter to and telling them about the confusion and informing them why we did what happened. You can do it a lot better than I can speak, I'm sure.
Any questions or discussion on the motion? I'll call the question. That motion fails. I'd like to move that we direct administration to review the procedural bylaw for clarity regarding motions to reconsider, just to clarify that wording. Just give administration a moment. So the motion is on our screens that council direct administration to review the procedure bylaw for clarity regarding motions to reconsider. Deputy Reeve Clausen.
No problem supporting this. Whenever you go through something, it kind of gets a little clunky and you have to follow procedure and to make sense. But also with some other discussions here about self-discussion, I wonder if that should be pointed out for clarity in the procedural bylaw. Or no, that would be code of conduct. Sorry, I rescind that.
It could be addressed in either, but I think it's outside of sort of this agenda item. So perhaps we could add that to a future agenda if there's some clarity around conduct and procedure at council meetings beyond motions to reconsider. Any questions or discussion on the motion? I'll call the question. Sorry. That motion is carried. Councillor Laprise.
I just wondered if administration needs a motion to direct to write a letter to the foundation.
I think it's normal procedure when somebody is appointed. Would it just be typical administrative procedure when there's a change in appointment? Do we typically send a follow-up letter?
We just inform them of council's decision. We would put a letter back out, whatever.
You wouldn't?
We would.
You would?
Yeah, we would.
Yeah.
If
And could administration just point to that we're aligning with their bylaw? That we were out of step and corrected it?
yeah.
Perfect, thank you. We'll move to agenda item 7.4.
Yeah, I'll move that we send a letter of support for Frontier Diagnostics. They come here on, I think it was November 19th for public presentation. And the participants, I believe, flew in from Ontario to present at and I think it just got overlooked at our next meeting. So yeah, I think it's an important consideration for our community.
Do you want to put a motion on the floor, Councillor Kester?
Yeah, I did.
Can you just reiterate the motion?
That we send a letter of support to Frontier Diagnostics as per their request.
Thank you, Councillor Kester. So administration has a motion on the screen that council authorize the Reeve to sign a letter of support for Frontier Diagnostics as per their request. Any questions or discussion? I do just have some comments. I find it intriguing in this region that there's been such vocal opposition to publicly funded but private provision of services such as hospice care on the grounds of principle or concern for public accountability and quality of care. Yet when similar models are tied to proposals like this, or the well-established practice of physicians delivering care in private settings, these objections seem to vanish. This selective application of scrutiny reveals a troubling double standard, if not outright hypocrisy. Such inconsistencies undermine the credibility of those who claim to champion fairness and accountability, as it suggests the issue is less about the principle itself and more about who is involved or benefits from the arrangement and how it might affect other entities' pursuit of a project. I won't vote in favor of a letter of support for Frontier Diagnostics specifically. I would vote in support of a letter a letter in support of a CT scanner, the idea of a CT scanner being brought into our community and funded by Alberta Health. I do have confidence in the provision of these services, like other services that are provided by private medical practitioners, like my own family physician. But I would ask that the letter of support be in support of a CT scanner placement in general, with an equal opportunity for any private medical practitioner to operate the scanner. Those are my thoughts. I recognize we have a motion regarding one specific private entity that could potentially operate a CT scanner. Councillor Kester.
I've had a few scans in my day, MRIs, and I believe they're all privately owned in the Mayfair. With some of the other ones, there's one down there at Chinook. Frontier's currently operating in Strathmore doing x-rays and ultrasounds. The hospital stopped doing ultrasounds. There's lots of instances where private enterprises are putting up facilities and they're paid for services from AHS. They're not services that an individual can go and buy and preclude everybody from having them. Any doctor in Strathmore can order a CT scan, and if there's space at the new place, that's where they would go. I can't understand bringing the word hospice into the equation, because that's privately funded and no different than Shasta being privately funded and wanting to come and build in the community. Or to that matter, a certain degree, Sagewood coming in as a privately funded organization, getting paid by healthcare dollars. If we didn't have these opportunities or these individuals willing to invest money in our community, we would have nothing. I don't understand the logic, but I think they deserve a letter of support. It's not every day somebody's willing to invest, I would say, millions of dollars here. Sure, they're going to make money, I would hope. They got to pay for it, but no different than other institutions around.
Thank you, Councillor Kester. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Eichert.
I will be supporting this, and the lead, and I thank the REIT for clarifying something, because I will be bringing forward a letter of support in the future date for the upcoming long-term care service that's coming in. And so I think this is a good idea, that if we're going to support individuals, that we should support all the individuals. So I will be bringing forward in a future date a letter of to write a letter of support for the other for the long-term care units that are coming into the Strathmore area. So I will be supporting this.
I guess just one point of clarity. Like if you're talking about the publicly funded, privately provided long-term care, supportive living level 4 and supportive living for dementia and hospice beds that are being funded by AHS, that went through, to my understanding, a request for expression of interest. That was an open call for any entities that were interested in providing that service to put forward a proposal through that transparent, open call for expressions of interest. To my knowledge, from listening, I heard part of the presentation virtually, and then I followed up just reviewing. There was a piece where my connection cut out. That wasn't my understanding, that this has already undergone that process where there was a request for expression of interest to provide CT services at the hospital. So that would delineate an existing contract that's been awarded through a process already. Does that make sense?
And it does make sense, and that makes perfect sense in the fact that however, because we have a municipality that is already signed on to this letter of support, I think it just sort of helps with the regional cooperation that we also, I understand how you pointed out that this is less than a perfect situation. This is somebody campaigning for a service that is needed, and we are sort of putting our finger on the scale at this particular, but it's no different than, in my mind, it's no different than this being brought to light to the government's attention that there is a need for a CT scanner they may not choose to go with this Frontier Diagnostic, right? And at that point in time, then we still sort of we're still supporting the fact that we need the more medical equipment, the more medical specialists we have in the area, the better it is for the area. I would believe this is a far away from a foregone conclusion that AHS is actually going to pick these guys. And I would assume that they'll probably put it, if there'll be some sort of an expression of interest on this, I would think would be because the government is not going to pick these guys for the exact reason that you say, because it looks like then they're picking winners and losers. And I think this government has shown that they've been reticent to do this, but I'm good with the letter of support, just because it brings out the fact that there is a need for a CT scanner in the area, and if the letter of support gets that to the governments, I'm good with that. So that's why I'm voting for it.
I prefer the letter of support doesn't have a specific name attached to a business. It doesn't mean that, because that way if somebody else comes and I don't know anything about the specifics of how to run that business or anything like that, but if my company came into council and said, hey, I want to do this, you guys sign this letter, that's not fair to anybody else. Is there a need for this? Sure. Yeah, absolutely. But do I know that they're the best? I have no knowledge of that. Yes, they're the ones that were here. But there may be others that we don't know about, where I just think it doesn't, we don't have to name a specific company.
Councillor Kester.
So how would you suppose you'd write a letter of support? I support a new CT scan in the hospital, not any individual putting it in. I see later on the agenda, we want to send a letter of support to the Agricultural Society. We leave the name blank on it too. We just think we need a new building. I think a letter of support is for the business. This business has shown they can operate a facility. It's a letter of support that we recognize we need a need. You've seen the numbers on that they presented, how underserved we are out here. To me, this is a no-brainer. We're not buying it. They're just going to want to approach the Alberta government, and if they approve of it, we're saying there's a need here. And Frontier educated us to that need. I really don't see the problem. And we're talking about Frontier and CT scans, really not long-term care. This isn't an institution that provides care, that take pictures. That is not readily available. And as a side bonus is what they said, and I know it's in Drumheller too, that's why they have a foundation to get these extra machines that attracts physicians. There's been an exodus of doctors and physicians in the area, And it's hard to attract new students without up-to-date detection equipment at their fingertips. So, yeah.
Any other questions or discussion? Councilor Priest.
I'll just say that I'm going to support this motion. I agree that it indicates a need in the community. This company came to us with the ask and the information. If another company was to come forward with the same ask, I think we could easily send another letter of support. I don't think it matters how many letters of support go to how many different companies. I'll support this because I think it's a need in the community.
Any other questions or discussion? Councillor Kester.
I'm going to ask for a recorded vote too.
Deputy Reeve Clausen.
Just want to clarify, Councillor Kester brought up an Ag Society letter. To me, it's two totally different things. One's a local group that's doing something and building something. It's a need for the, so if the Strathmore Hospital Auxiliary wanted this, no problem. But it's when it's tied to a business, that's where there's an issue with me. We don't get, like I said, we don't have the local knowledge to know if this is better than anybody else. But yeah, someone could come, but maybe they don't know the process. Maybe they don't know that. I would hope that AHS has a screening process and at least a way to look, maybe get at least three quotes before they do something like this. I don't know, but that's where I just wanted to differentiate between the two.
Councillor Kester.
Frontier Diagnostics is in the business of taking x-rays, ultrasounds, pain management. They are highly busy. They are in the business.
Any other questions or discussion? Just to elaborate on Deputy Reeve Clausen's comments, that's a key delineating factor for me, is that with the comparison between the Western Events and Cultural Centre and a CT scanner, the comparison between the Strathmore and District Agricultural Society, which is, I think for me, the key delineator with the society is that they're nonprofit, and Frontier Diagnostics is, as Councillor Kester indicated, a private business for profit. And I would contend that even taking pictures or radiology is certainly providing healthcare. That is a key part of healthcare. So it is providing care, just to clarify my perspective on that. But for me, I will reiterate, I would be supportive of a entity agnostic letter in support of the Government of Alberta opening up a request for expression of interest. They certainly may be the only entity that would respond, or the only entity that is positioned to have the economies of scale to provide something like this. That's not for my consideration. My consideration as a councillor for Wheatland County is good governance here. And for me, good governance is not giving preferential treatment to one for-profit private entity over other potential entities that haven't come to us. I'm fully in support of providing Frontier Diagnostics the letter, but for me, the key is how that letter is worded. If it's a sort of a, agnostic isn't really even the right word, but like a general letter, I think a good example of this is for the Broadband Fund. We have provided letters of support to entities. I believe there was more than one, and the letter was general in nature in that we support the provision of broadband services and the strengthening of our telecoms network and the connectivity within Wheatland County. From my recollection, those letters were not specifically supporting that entity, but supporting the principle. I would support a letter, and we can provide it to Frontier Diagnostics, supporting increased provision of radiology and diagnostic imaging care in this region. I don't support requesting the proposal specific on page 22 of the Public Presentation Committee agenda, which was a request for Alberta to provide Frontier Diagnostics with the contract. That's the piece, if that's integrated into the letter, that I have a significant concern with, that we're basically advocating for one private entity without being aware if there are other entities that would like to compete for this opportunity. Recognizing that that would be in the provincial jurisdiction, but how the letter from Wheatland County is worded is our jurisdiction, and I think it's critical that we get it right. So to clarify, I'm fully in support of a letter of support requesting consideration of increased access to diagnostic imaging in this region. I'm also cognizant that we have relatively close proximity to the city, where we do, as Councillor Kester indicated, have multiple options of different private providers for diagnostic imaging. I also recognize that that's challenging for people. Obviously in the winter, transportation can be a challenge for people, all of those things. So I do support the advocacy for the increased provision of healthcare services in this region. I do not support if we are specifically requesting that a contract be provided to one private entity. Any other questions or discussion? Councillor Laverson.
Well, I just want to say I don't find the points against this motion convincing at all, so I'll be supporting this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Laverson. Councillor Kester.
You mentioned the Agricultural Society. It wasn't per se one's this or that. In the past, we write a letter of support, we put the person's name in. This is the first time I've ever heard that we're going to write a letter of support and leave it blank. Like, how do we decide, or how are we going to decide now how we're going to do a letter of support? They ask for a letter of support. We usually almost always give a letter of support. I don't understand why the differentiation is now. So yeah, I'm support a letter of support. And if somebody else comes in and they want to build another one, great, I'll give them a letter of support too. And yeah, we live close to Calgary. Yeah, it just takes a year and a half to get a scan. So anybody who's trying to help the residents of this municipality or people in Alberta as a general, yeah, we're underserved and they're stepping forward to try and fill that gap. I wholeheartedly support anybody trying that.
I don't think I'm making myself clear. I'm not suggesting that I would support a blank letter of support. That's illogical to me. What I'm supporting is a similar letter of support to what we have provided other private entities. The instance I'm referencing was in pursuit of universal broadband funding. I'm trying to pull up an example, not pulling it up that quickly, where it was a letter of support in principle of increasing connectivity in the region. I am suggesting I am fully comfortable supporting, voting in favor of a letter of support that indicates that Wheatland County Council is supportive of increasing access to diagnostic imaging in the region. That does help our residents and our community. What I am extremely uncomfortable with is the element of the request during the public participation meeting where we are advocating for one specific private operator, prior to an open competitive process to determine who that provider would be. So to me, the key question is, what is the letter of support? There's a chance I can support this motion to sign a letter of support. Well, maybe not for, well, it could be for, no, not for Frontier Diagnostics as per their request, because their request was for Alberta to provide them specifically with that contract. If the letter of support were to be similar to other letters of support that we have provided to other private entities, then I would be comfortable with it. So I'm not sure if, I guess if the motion passes, it would include, not everybody may have the Public Presentation Committee agenda up, but their proposal specifics were including Frontier investing a proposal for Frontier to invest the capital, Frontier to cover the operating costs, request for Alberta to provide Frontier Diagnostics with the contract, so all of the revenue that would be generated, for CT interpretation fee and operational fees. So it's the proposal specifics that are challenging me. Now, I'm not recalling offhand if they gave specifics around what they would like a letter of support to include. I don't recall that. But I guess it's really down to what that letter of support, if the letter of support is to request that the Government of Alberta allocate a contract to Frontier Diagnostics as per the presentation, I'm extremely uncomfortable with that. If the letter of support is to be provided to Frontier Diagnostics in support of increased capacity for diagnostic imaging, I'm in support of that. So I guess looking for more clarity around, and to the mover, are you looking for your letter of support to specifically request that Frontier Diagnostics be awarded the contract?
I'm not aware of any process in the Alberta government requesting expressions of interest to put any diagnostic equipment in the hospital. This is I believe, an initiative on their part to procure diagnostic equipment and ideally put it in the hospital where people are that would make use of it, especially the people that are not visiting the hospital on an emergency basis, that too, if you're in a car wreck or whatever. The patients that are admitted into hospital, as well as individual doctors requesting the procedure. It's the way they get paid. That's the way they're paid now. They have a contract. Canadian Diagnostics provide the equipment. Alberta Health pays them for the service. You never pay for a procedure in any of the others. You can go to some private clinics that are out there, but we're not talking private clinic here. We're talking a public clinic. Motion, they asked for a letter of support that they provide a CT scan and they would like to build it in the hospital. And I'll just leave it stand at that. How they get paid or how their contract is, that's really of no concern of mine. That's between Frontier and Alberta Health. They work out a deal and they're both happy. Yeah, you get the space, I get them. Yeah, fine. But we weren't asked to, I don't believe, say you get paid. They are asking us for a letter of support to put a CT scan in the hospital. I would just put the motion is that we provide a letter of support for Frontier Diagnostics and their bid or in their request to acquire a CT scanner. Leave the rest up to them. Where they put it, how they get paid, that's their business.
Certainly, the payment schedule would be between whoever the successful proponent and the Government of Alberta or AHS, whoever the contract is with. What we are responsible for is the wording of our letter of support. So I'm just looking for clarity. Are you requesting that the letter of support include the component of the proposal where we're requesting the Government of Alberta to provide Frontier Diagnostics with the contract, which clearly has payment tied to it? Because I feel like I have serious concerns with that.
Okay. As councillor of the area and of Wheatland County, being that 99% of the services in the province are provided with your healthcare. I would say a letter of support would have to include a contract with AHS to provide the service. Same as any other place in the province. I don't know why that has to be in there.
I'm not suggesting it has to be
in their
in there.
letter, in their thing, their presentation. I don't have what they specifically asked for, but my memory is they just asked for a letter of support for a CT scan, and the Alberta government, I don't know. So you're telling me you're against having a CT scan brought into the hospital and AHS paying for it?
Nope, that's not what I said. What I'm
You're
against,
against that a certain
I wasn't
individual
done
puts it in
responding,
and gets
Councillor
paid for
Custer.
it.
I'm against our council writing a letter of support that gives preferential treatment to one private entity who's had an opportunity to present without having an open, competitive process for other entities to have the same opportunity. So I'll give you an analogy. The Universal Broadband Fund, we provided letters of support to private entities for. That's the last time I can recollect providing letters of support to private businesses. That was an open, competitive call for proposals to provide connectivity to Wheatland County. To my recollection, we provided more than one letter of support. Those letters of support were in support of increasing connectivity. The correlation with this is I am fully supportive of a letter of support requesting increased capacity for diagnostic imaging, including the consideration of a placement of a CT scanner at the Strathmore Hospital. What I am seriously concerned with is that council would be requesting that contract be awarded to a specific entity prior to an open competitive process. So that's the differentiation. Recognizing that our letter of support does not mean that the government of Alberta or an entity under the government of Alberta and Alberta Health would do so. My concern is with what I will be signing my name to on behalf of the county and alignment with, yes, things like procurement, things like open and fair and competitive processes that are foundational to our society. So if the letter could read that it was a letter of support of increasing capacity for diagnostic imaging, and Frontier Diagnostics could include it with their proposal, I am fully supportive of that. I'm not supportive of the request for that's any specific entity for us to be advocating for a specific private entity. I don't think it aligns with my principles or the principles of our role. Any other questions or discussion?
So I
Councillor
believe your arguments do have some merit. The question I have is, if I vote against this letter of support, does that end it here? Or if that motion gets defeated, can we bring up a motion of support that is more generic, that doesn't name, that we can say that we're looking for increased, it makes sense that we have capacity, it's good for everything, but we're just not naming we're not picking quote unquote a winner? Because your arguments do have considerable amount of merit. So I just don't want this letter of support to die on the fact that there's a company named that lobbied for this. I think it's fraught with danger to say, well, the Alberta government's going to do due diligence, because we've seen in the past that the Alberta government has tendency to sometimes let these things slip through the door, and we could be encouraging somebody that's like there could be a better company to do this, which would be a betterment to to the whole area. So my question is, if we can have a letter of support that is more generic, that does not name that Frontier Diagnostic can put into their deal and say, yes, there is support for this in the community, and they're not named in our deal, I'm good with that.
And I'm thinking exactly the same as you. I do not want to see the request for a letter of support to not go forward. My concern is the wording of the letter of support. And that's why I was seeking clarity from the mover in terms of what that would include. Because again, it's in the details, right? So as per their request, does that mean that we're speaking to the proposal specifics, or is that just as per their request for a letter of support? At the end of the day, our council is responsible for the contents of the letter of support and what that looks like. And we can provide that in the manner that is acceptable. Where I'm trying to get to is, what is the will of council in terms of the content? Is the will of council for it to be a request for the awarding of a contract to one entity? Is there more consensus around a letter of support in increasing capacity for diagnostic imaging, including CT services? And then it's up to the government of Alberta, to action that, but we're providing our support in principle to that provision. If I was hearing support for a more generic letter, we could, we have a provision, we could table this, we could see if administration has capacity to draft a letter even today and table this to the end of the meeting so council could actually review the letter, but we would need some sort of direction in terms of the content of the letter for administration to create a draft for our consideration. Deputy Reeve Clausen.
So there's two things. That there is a motion on the floor that doesn't sound like anybody wants to change it, so that can either be tabled or defeated. And if somebody else, because there is a discussion, letter of support is an agenda item, one could get defeated and a new one could come. So whatever is easier. I'd like to see a letter drafted to see what the wording is. Maybe that will, maybe in two different ways of specifically what this motion has and one that is more generic. I think would be provide the clarity that I'm seeking, and I think the Reeve is seeking as well. Still given support, still I think it's just you're not picking quote unquote a winner, because I don't feel we have the expertise in this room to decide if company ABC is the best ones here, and that was in their ask, it was in their presentation to be awarded a contract. And we're, by supporting as requested, we're saying that, and that's not our purview.
So I still support this motion. If it's defeated, I would support a new motion that was more generic, but I feel like we are imposing ourselves on the provincial government. We could provide a letter of support, and it is up to them to decide whether they want to open it up for competition, have others submit. And then, if they did that, we could provide letters to other service providers. Honestly, I do think, I hear what you're saying, that the province doesn't always do the best job at procurement, but I don't feel like it's our responsibility to oversee that. So I'd still support this motion. If it's defeated, I'll support a different motion. It's all the same to me.
So I'm not, just a question around clarity around, I don't recall any comments about the province and the work that they do with procurement, or was there? Okay, I apologize. I'm not recalling that. It's certainly not a concern of mine that I'm addressing today. But what we do have to take responsibility for is the position that we're taking on in correspondence. Regarding a path forward, so I'm certainly hearing diverse perspectives, not necessarily hearing consensus. Would administration have capacity to draft 2 letters of support? One that would be, generic is also a terrible word, but a letter that would be addressed to the government of Alberta, perhaps to the Minister of Health, indicating that Wheatland County Council is strongly advocating for increased healthcare capacity in our region, including increased capacity for diagnostic imaging and the placement of a CT scanner in the Strathmore, I cannot recall the actual name, the Strathmore District Health, Strathmore Hospital, whatever the actual name of it is. And a second letter as per the proposal specifics of Frontier Diagnostics. Would council be open to the consideration of 2 letters? Or do we?
I think it should be up to the mover to decide whether he wants.
I just call for the vote.
So I'm just
Go through,
still
then
trying
we
to
can
look.
write letters.
Okay,
I don't see the sense of tasking staff with writing 2 different letters. Go through the procedure, do the vote. If it doesn't vote, sounds like somebody maybe have another motion, fine, then write the letter. I'm not saying that I wouldn't provide a letter of support to another company that come and ask for one for the exact same thing. Why not? We're running a win-win business here. We're just advocating for increased capacity is all. If you're against who's doing it or they're going to make money, that's not our preview. That's Alberta Health or AHS. Just a letter of support for the betterment of our citizens to gain timely access to tests.
so just clarity on 2 comments you made. I have 0 concerns about the entity. I don't know them. And I have 0 concerns about private entities generating profit. I think it's critical to motivate business in a capitalist society, and it's foundational to who we are. Those are not my concerns. My concerns are our role and the process. And I guess really just seeking clarity, and I don't feel that my question has been answered. I'm trying to interpret the wording of the motion. That council authorized the REEF to sign a letter of support for Frontier Diagnostics as per their request. That could be interpreted from my perspective in 2 ways. So we're providing them a letter of support as per their request, like we're just providing a letter of support. Is it critical to you that it indicates specific support for Frontier Diagnostics to be awarded the contract, or would you be comfortable with the letter of support being provided to Frontier Diagnostics, but being supportive of increased capacity of diagnostic imaging and the provision of CT services at the Strathmore Hospital? Would you be comfortable with the letter looking like that, looking very similar to other letters of support that we have done to other private entities?
Okay. Every other letter of support that I can remember in here is named the person that has asked for the letter of support. You're asking to take the name off of this letter of support. So my motion is that council authorize the REEF to sign a letter of support for Frontier Diagnostics as per their request. They requested for a letter of support. I believe their name has to be on the letter because they requested it. That's my motion. They may come here, they took time out, they flew here from Ontario ask for a letter of support. I have absolutely no problem in giving them a letter of support. If somebody else comes in, if Mayfair comes in and they want a letter of support, yeah, they're a credible organization or not. They want to enhance capacity and they do a presentation, I would give them a letter of support too. But right now, this is the only one we have. We didn't ask for people to come and advocate for competition. No, they come to asking us for a letter of support. And that's my motion, just the way it sits there. A letter of support for Frontier Diagnostics as their request, sitting here speaking to us.
Councillor Baker.
So just some clarity, this letter would be written to Frontier Diagnostics. But in the letter of content, it would say that we support the area needing a CT scan. Am I right? It would not be going to AHS, it'd be going to Frontier Diagnostics.
For me, the critical piece is not who it's addressed to. I'm comfortable with it being addressed to Frontier Diagnostics. To me, it's the content of the letter, and I still don't have clarity from the mover on whether the letter would need to indicate that we're supportive of a specific contract being awarded or a contract being awarded to a specific entity.
So I agree with you there. It shouldn't be, the letter shouldn't have the contents of what we feel that who should be awarded for that. It should be that we support, which I think we all do, we support a CT scan being brought into our area, and we do find a need. If that could be written that way, I would agree with it. Yeah, we support the fact that our area needs it. That's, yeah, but not that they get awarded it.
Councilor Kester, just your microphone, sorry.
Oh, sorry. I agree with Donna.
Deputy Reeve Clausen.
In their presentation, page 22, I went back to look at it, but I understand where it says, by a letter of support, you're saying, and they requested this, request for Alberta to provide Frontier Diagnostics with contract for CT interpretation fee and operational fee. So that's where it is. So, you know, I could say upon the presentation, council supports the need for a CT in the area. Doesn't say who, whatever, but they're asking for us to support them in a contract.
So, and I think that we shouldn't go that far, but to explain to that we do need one in the area, and they can forward that on with their presentation.
Yes, there's no doubt that after the presentation,
But it would be
makes sense,
written.
but to say this is the one that you have to go with, no.
Yeah.
Is there a need? Absolutely.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
So Councillor Kester, so they're suggesting that council authorize the Reeve to sign a letter of support for Frontier Diagnostics. Stop. In acquiring a CT scan.
Well, in the placement of a CT scanner in Strathmore Hospital, not them, like them acquiring. That's the key for me. Councillor Kester, I know when you turned your microphone on, you said you agree with Councillor Bigger, but what I heard before that was for you that it's key that we are supporting Frontier. I am fine if the letter is addressed to Frontier Diagnostics. I think that's appropriate. They've requested the letter. Where I'm seeking clarity is, would you be comfortable if the letter of support did not specifically reference that we are supportive of Frontier Diagnostics specifically, but if the letter could be more general in nature of supportive of their request to increase capacity for diagnostic imaging, including the placement of a CT scanner, but make it eliminate the preference for one private entity prior to an open competitive process.
So when we wrote a letter of support to Shaw to provide internet services, did we say any company? No, we said Shaw. What's the purpose of a letter of support if you don't name the company? You want to knock off, oh, we don't have to include a contract for AHS. Well, I could maybe go that far. But this letter of support was the Frontier. Send the letter to them. It's their letter. They can use it to acquire a contract or not. They have to figure out how to pay for it. I don't think they're going to do it all by themselves. I mean, it's unreasonable to expect that. I don't understand what the conflict is. We always provide a letter of support for what people ask for that makes sense. Why doesn't this not make sense? That an outfit would like to buy a CT scan, and in their presentation, they would like it in the hospital, and they want support for that. Are we against them putting it in the hospital? Are we against the CT scan? I would hope not.
I think we've made it clear that that's not the case, Councillor Kester. I'm hearing strong consensus around the table that I have not heard. The only person I haven't heard from, I'm speaking, Councillor Kester. I've heard strong support from every councillor. Councillor Laursen hasn't weighed in, but he hasn't opposed the placement of a CT scanner. Where I'm hearing the discussion is around council putting forward a letter with a preferential request for a private entity. Again, I will reiterate, the delineating factor for me is that this is not within the context of an open competitive process. If there was an open competitive process, for example, like the Universal Broadband Fund that's being advertised broadly, that entities that undertake this work should, if they're in this business, be aware of the program and the opportunity, be submitting proposals. You're right, we did submit, to my recollection, multiple letters of support to those entities. That was part of an open and competitive process. And we did reference general support for increased connectivity as well in those letters. The factor for me that is unique in this circumstance is that it's not currently part of an open competitive process, and that's why I'm leaning more towards a more general letter of support, which I am fully in support of and would vote in favor of. Where I'm challenged is because other entities, there is no advertised request for expression of interest or project funding being advertised. And I recognize that that is not our jurisdiction, not suggesting we have any role in that, suggesting we have full responsibility for what we sign our name to. Councillor Eichert.
So it would really, really help me.
Microphone.
Right. It would really, really help me if I could actually see a letter that what we're actually, because what I understand, this is sounding like, it sounds like everybody's on the same page, just the interpretation, how we're coming at it. As per their request, I mean, that's like, how do I in good conscience sign off on that? I mean, I believe that we can put their name on a letter of support and just say that this company is looking at putting a CT scanner imaging machine in the Strathmore Hospital, and we support any operation that will do that, something along those lines. But we're arguing about what could be. Let's take some time, let's put a letter together, get it down, let's vote on the letter. But that's my opinion.
Councillor
I'll
Kester.
suspend my motion until staff has an opportunity to write a letter.
Okay, sounds good.
And are you comfortable if the letter is, for the most part, consistent with other letters where it's, the key thing that I am not comfortable with is requesting the province award the contract to a specific company. I will reiterate, I am comfortable with it being addressed to Frontier Diagnostics. We can say that we appreciated their presentation and that, you know, we appreciate them taking the time. We appreciate their proposal. Where I'm not comfortable is saying we're requesting the government of Alberta provide preferential treatment to them. So if you are comfortable, I think with that, it would give our administration direction in terms of drafting the letter, and then council could consider it.
I would not put the word preferential in the letter. Period. I would say put Frontier Diagnostics in the letter, CT scan in the letter, hospital in the letter, and a contract with AHS in the letter, not the word preferential. That's AHS's call. If they get 5 people wanting to put a CT scan in the hospital in Strathmore, then AHS can run a competition if they so choose. But right now, nobody's knocking on the door to put a scan in the hospital. I'm okay with them.
Does that give administration enough direction in terms of creating a draft letter?
No, administration thinks we're clear. We'll get that draft letter going right away. Thank you.
Perfect. Just looking at procedure. Just one moment. So we don't have a procedure regarding suspending, but Councillor Kester, if you would be willing.
I'll table my motion.
Perfect. To the end of the agenda so that we can give administration time to draft a letter.
Administration has the capacity to present.
Okay, sounds good. Any questions or discussion on the tabling motion? I'll call the question. It's a motion, so I believe we would need to vote to table. It is a tabling motion, so. That motion is carried. Let's move to agenda item 7.5.
Good morning, Council. Brian from administration. On page 69 of your agenda package is the council resolution tracker. As always, the council resolution, the council resolution starts on page 72. Anything in yellow is deemed ongoing. Anything in green is deemed complete. If there's any questions about this report, please let me know. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from administration or from council to administration?
I was just wondering if we should consider doing a kind of a review of some of the outstanding ones. Some of them are old, like there's 20 plus resolutions that are older. I wonder if we should have a look at them at some point just to determine whether they are doable or if they are relevant, or if, just thinking about an upcoming election and having these carry over. At some point, I think
It's a
we
really
should
good idea.
look at it.
Yeah, it would be administration's intention to do that at some point prior to the municipal election, just to see what is relevant and what's not. At this point in time, we're probably just going to keep them on there. However, if council chooses to do something different, then so be it.
Yeah, okay, that's fair.
Council's wishes.
I'll move that council accept the council resolution tracker dated December 17, 2024 as information.
Thank you, Councillor Eichert. Any questions or discussion? I'll call the question. That motion is carried. We'll move to agenda item 7.6.
Yes, good morning, Council. Brian again from administration. Page 81 of your agenda package is the Federal Rule Association RMA resolution. At the October 15th organizational meeting, Council did make a motion to direct administration to bring a discussion on a possible resolution to a committee of the whole on an RMA Federal Rule Association. However, just with the timing, it didn't end up hitting the November meeting. So administration is bringing this forward now because the next committee of the whole is February 11th, 2025. And that is past the RMA resolution deadline. So we thought it would be prudent to bring this to council today to see what council would like administration to proceed or move forward with for the resolution for the next meeting in January. So we can meet that resolution timeline. If there's any questions about this, please let me know. Thank you.
Any questions? Or council's wishes?
So I was just thinking about what we kind of want to see happen here. But maybe all that's needed is for federal advocacy to be shared with other rural municipal associations. Like, I don't know whether we need to create a whole new stream within RMA, but just to have a process for any federal advocacy to go back and forth between all the various provincial bodies, so that maybe combined advocacy could be facilitated. I don't know, that's all. I was thinking about this.
Any other questions? I've thought about that too. Having recently been in Ottawa for multiple advocacy meetings with the federal government, I think there's merit and strength in having an entity that could be that voice for the collective rural perspective and to share the rural realities directly with the federal government. And I think with potential changes within our federal government, I think there could be a significant opportunity to have that rural voice be heard and for rural realities to be understood more fully and to be reflected in programming from the federal government. I think there's certainly merit in terms of having current provincial and territorial associations collaborate, but it can be challenging just to schedule meetings, say, where each association president, for example, would be in attendance at an advocacy meeting, whereas if you had an entity that could aggregate the issues and aggregate the positions, of course, in collaboration with all of the existing provincial and territorial associations. But this is really to create that voice, and it would be a process to create because you would need to engage with all of the entities already in terms of how best to form this, how to structure it. There's certainly complexities involved in it. And this is really not even us directing that it happen. It's directing that we would bring it to the floor of RMA through the district. And then if it is supported at the district level, to bring it to the RMA membership to really gauge if this is a priority for RMA members in general and for the membership to give direction to RMA. Now, RMA itself would not be that voice. Like, RMA is the voice for the rural municipalities of Alberta. So what it would be suggesting is maybe just that RMA sort of lead or spearhead, facilitate perhaps a process to explore creating an entity like that. And then that would be iterative in and of itself, how that forms, right? There would be engagement across the country with rural municipalities and rural leaders across Alberta. I don't know if that, I see your point for sure. I think in terms of effective advocacy, there could be strength in having an entity to do that for rural Canada. Council's wishes.
I'll make the motion that council directs administration to draft a resolution for RMA for a new federal rural association and bring it to a future regular council meeting for council's consideration. And with the discussions that hear how it rolls out, that'll come after. I mean, let's take it to our district and then take it, if that gets support, then, you know, the usual process, it may fall flat on its face. It may have a lot of support, we don't know, so.
I'll open the floor to discussion. Councillor Kester.
Do we have to define rural? I know in the RMA, we have urban associations in it, like villages and towns are members. I know definition of rural maybe in Ontario is a community with less than 100,000. Like we have to come up with a definition of rural and what we want. Is it everything but a big city? I don't know.
That's a really good question, Councillor Custer. I think that that would be something that I would like to see as part of that engagement with the provincial and territorial associations and with rural colleagues across Canada to hear the different perspectives. There's certainly, there's different definitions depending on the context. I've been told that there are federal funding programs that define rural as anything under 250,000. Your reference to 100,000 is also very common. Which really does just exclude in Alberta those, you know, the two major metro areas. To me, that would be something that would be better defined collaboratively as part of the process of forming the organization. It would be, you know, part of analysis and careful consideration of membership and those types of things. The core membership for RMA is just the 69 rural and specialized municipalities in Alberta. We do have associate members that can access business services who are part of Alberta Municipalities core group, but that is actually legislated through a provincial act who our core membership is, and as well reflected in our bylaws. But I think that would be an important consideration as consideration of a formation of an entity is done iteratively and in collaboration with colleagues across Canada, but it's an important question. Any other questions or discussion? I'll call the question. That motion is carried. We'll move to agenda item 7.7. Good morning.
Morning, Council. Joel again from administration, here to go through the interim operating and capital budgets. Just be a brief summary. Council was provided a detailed review at the Committee of the Whole meeting back in November. And so the package today is just the proposal for the final approval of the operating and the capital budgets for 2025. The numbers included in the package for the proposed approval are consistent with what was provided at the Committee of the Whole meeting, other than some changes that have been noted in the report itself. So for example, in the operating side, we've listed a table of some of the changes that were made to the original package. And then as well with the capital, we've itemized some narrative changes here, but on top of that, we've provided a table, which I will scroll to. Sorry, the budget is very large here. I believe we provide at the end. There we go. On the capital side as well, we just for efficiency provided a list of the projects that had any monetary implications on the changes, whereas in the report itself, there was some items that may have just been a funding change or just a wording change. And so that was provided in the report itself. So with the changes listed here for the capital and the operating in the body of the report, there was two other project pages that we included. And the reasons for that was the Wheatland Shores building repairs had some discussion from the committee during the meeting and some requested changes for that. So that project page has been amended, and then this will, the numbers here match the proposed capital budget as well. That's being proposed in the package. And then this additional project page for this bridge project was also included, as this one was brought forward due to some recent engineering reports that just had our public works manager reprioritizing them. So with those two project pages have been included, the other project pages in the capital budget were removed just for efficiency of the package itself, because those have already been provided at the Committee of the Whole meeting. With that, concludes my presentation. Administration is available for any questions.
Any questions? Councillor Custer.
Just a question to transportation, that bridge that we talked about last meeting, is that included in the budget by east of Rocky Ford there?
Just go to the bridge section here. Oh, sorry, through the chair. Yes, that was the project page that we just showed up there. And so that one's been brought forward and included in the budget now. Yes, sorry.
I like names instead of numbers. I'm good with it.
Any other questions? Council's wishes. Councillor Kester.
I move that council approves the intern operating budget 2025 to 2027 as presented.
Thank you, Councillor Kester. Any questions or discussion on the operating budget? I'll call the question. That motion is carried. Council's wishes regarding our capital budget. Councillor Bigger.
I move that council approves the intern capital budget 2025 to 2029 as presented.
Thank you, Councillor Bigger. Any questions or discussion?
Not a question or a discussion, really, just thanks to administration. I just went on a finance course, and a lot of municipalities don't get nearly the amount of information and the different ways you present it. So appreciate that very much. When we were asked for questions, honestly, I went through both budgets and thought of questions and then quickly found the answer in the information provided. So I just really thank you so much for the clarity of the information provided and the details.
Yeah, I would certainly echo Councillor Laprisa's comments. A thank you to our administration and to each of our department teams as well for all of the work that goes into this entire budgeting process. It is comprehensive, and I would echo your comments about the strength of the information that is provided to council. A good balance between detailed enough that we know what we are authorizing in terms of investments and expenditures, but not weighing us down with so much detail that we're, getting lost in that as well. So I think we've struck a really good balance, and I think this process has been significantly strengthened over the last number of years. So thank you to your teams and for providing us the information to make good decisions. Any other questions or discussion? I'll call the question. That motion is carried. If I may just ask for council consideration around a motion related to the budgets, and that's we're doing significant work around the asset management and replacement costing for our infrastructure. I'm wondering about council considering a motion just to review our reserves following the completion of the asset management work that's being done by our administration. So I'll move that administration bring information regarding reserves for review following the completion of our asset management planning. I think it's important that we start looking at a longer term capital plan that extends beyond what we're required to address through the MGA by the provincial government, and start addressing those significant asset management needs once we have complete information. So the motion is that council direct administration to bring a report on reserves following completion of the asset management review. Any questions or discussion on the motion? Deputy Reeve Clausen.
When will the asset management review be completed?
I believe we just had an update on that. I asked, and I believe it's February
That's what I thought.
for the asset management replacement costing work.
Yeah, through the, sorry.
I'll let you go ahead.
Yeah, through the chair, yes. So we are aiming for around the February timeframe, but there are some internal meetings going on and review. So if that changes or it's a little bit later, and that will inform council, probably maybe in one of our update reports.
That's perfect. Thank you. Any other questions or discussion? I'll call the question. That motion is carried. We'll move to agenda item 7.8.
Good morning, Council. Stefan Kuntz on behalf of Planning and Development. This item was originally going to be presented by Suzanne. She sends her regards, though she's ill today. She is online if there are any questions, though, but you have me, unfortunately, for the presentation. So this item begins on page 159 of the agenda. It is an encroachment agreement for 112 8th Avenue in Gleason. And the lands are, of course, located within the hamlet of Gleason. They are 40 meters north of Crowfoot Street and on the east side of 8th Avenue. So this item came to our attention when the applicant submitted a certificate for compliance. The RPR identified a shed and fence that extend beyond the rear property line into the alleyway behind the lands. So this is 0.66 meters for the shed and 1.05 meters for the fence. So in order to obtain compliance status, they could obviously get rid of these items or go down the path we're doing now, which is to get an encroachment agreement and then a variance to the required 1.22 meter setback through a development permit. So pending council's decision today regarding the encroachment agreement, staff will bring back the document or the development permit to MPC for consideration for the variance. There are a number of photos of or a couple photos, I suppose. See the shed and fence in question. So staff circulated to the county's transportation department. They had no concerns with the encroachment request, noting that the shed and fence have historically not hindered the usability of the alleyway. The county is granted the authority to issue an encroachment agreement under the Municipal Government Act, Traffic Safety Act, and the County Public Works Policy, which specifies that council is the authority for granting encroachments and may do so on a case-by-case basis. The standard encroachment agreement template is included for your information in the report. If approved, once signed, it will be caveated to the title of the parcel. So that concludes my presentation. Happy to take any questions should you have any.
Any questions from council? Council's wishes.
I'll move that council approves entering into an encroachment agreement with the landowner of 112 8th Avenue, Gleason, to permit the existing shed to encroach 0.66 meters and an existing fence to encroach 1.05 meters over the east rear property line of Plan 5345N, Block E, Lots 5 and 6, and further that the Reeve and Chief Administrative Officer be authorized to sign the agreement.
Thank you, Councillor Laprise. Any questions or discussion on the motion?
Just a clarification on encroachment. So say this shed gets torn down or rebuilt or something, would they be able to put it back in the same spot or would they have to follow the current?
Through the chair to council, no, they would have to comply with the applicable rules of the day.
Okay, thank you.
Good question. Any other questions or discussion? I'll call the question. That motion is carried. We will move to agenda item 7.9. I can speak to this. We had a request from the Strathmore District Agricultural Society to consider providing a letter of support for the Western Events and Cultural Centre. The Government of Alberta is in budget deliberations, and there is a request for consideration of a capital contribution. There's a draft letter that administration has provided at our seats. Council's wishes. Council's wishes.
I'll move to have the Reeve sign the letter as presented, dated December 17th, 2024.
Any questions or discussion? I'll call the question. That motion is carried. We'll move to agenda item 7.10. I am requesting consideration of ratification for my attendance at a press conference as requested by Minister Brian Jean. It was December 11th in Calgary. It was regarding the successful awarding of Alberta Petrochemical Incentive Program funding to Rocky Mountain Clean Fuels, Inc. It was a great event. Rocky Mountain Clean Fuels is doing phenomenal work, and I was proud to announce there that they were actually the first person that utilized, or not the first person, the first business that utilized our tax incentive bylaw. Looking for ratification for a half-day per diem, mileage, and parking for that event. Council's wishes.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Councillor Laprise. Any questions or discussion? Just give administration a moment. Any questions or discussion? If we could just add on December 11th, just so we have the date. The motion is on our screens.
Just notice it said moved by link. We're just, there it changed.
Perfect. So the motion is on our screens. Any questions or discussion? I'll call the question. That motion is carried. That brings us to our closed session. I believe we have 2 agenda items. I will move us into closed session, and I'll call the question. That motion is carried. Good afternoon, everybody. We'll call the meeting back to order. Council moved out of closed session and then recessed for a lunch break. We're reconvening. First, we will move to, are there any motions arising from closed session? I know there should be one. Oh, also just a note, I will just publicly declare that I recused myself from the agenda item under FOIP section 24, advice from officials re fire and 911 dispatch service options due to potential pecuniary interest. And I'll open the floor to motions arising from closed session. Councillor Laprise.
I'll move that council directs administration to send a letter in response to the town of Strathmore's letter dated December 11th, 2024.
Thank you, Councillor Laprise. Any questions or discussion on the motion? Councillor Kester.
I'm not in favor of the letter that's being sent to Strathmore. I went through annexation once. We opposed it, and it went bad. I don't want the same thing to happen. And I remember at the time, I got some information from a councillor from another neighboring municipality that told me if anybody asks you for annexation land, say, where, what, yes. It is, you get a lot better. Yeah, no, I kind of.
Thanks for those comments, Councillor Kester. Councillor Laursen.
I'm the same. I won't be able to support that letter.
Any other questions or discussion? I'll speak in support of the letter, acknowledging the past experience from Councillor Kester, and these matters can be complex, but I do believe that as councillors on behalf of Wheatland County, we have the responsibility to look at the broader implications and consequences of proposals for potential annexation, and yeah, we just have to do our due diligence and look out for the long-term interests of Wheatland County. Councillor Laprise.
And I think the letter indicates a willingness to collaborate to find mutually beneficial solutions. So that's why I support it.
Yeah, and I would echo that as well. I do appreciate that, and we had previously extended that as well after our previous council meeting to the town as well through our administration. Any other questions or discussion? I'll call the question. And there was a request for a recorded vote, so that motion passes with Link, Eichert, Clausen, and Laprise voting in favor, and Kester and Laursen voting opposed. Were there any other motions arising from closed session? If not, administration had an opportunity to draft a letter with a couple of different options for the first paragraph regarding agenda item 7.4. I believe we need a motion, let me just confirm. A motion to, sorry, just give me one moment. So if in our procedure bylaw under 165.1, it says if the matter or motion was tabled to a different part in the same meeting, or was tabled indefinitely with no set return date or conditions identified, it must be lifted from the table by resolution prior to returning consideration of it, prior to resuming consideration of it. If a motion to lift from the table is defeated, the matter or motion will remain on the table until a motion to lift it from the table is passed. So we need a motion just to lift the agenda item 7.4 from the table if we would like to advance consideration of a draft letter. Councillor Kester.
That motion.
Thank you. Any questions or discussion? Oh, motions to lift from the table are debatable, but cannot be amended. So any discussion? I'll call the question. That motion is carried. I'll turn it over to administration. I mean, you don't really have to say anything. Administration drafted a letter based on a conversation that they heard during the discussions by council. There's two versions of the letter. It's been indicated to me that the only difference between the two letters is that first paragraph. So the one letter reads, on behalf of Wheatland County Council, I would like to extend our sincere thanks for your informative presentation on November 19th, 2024. Wheatland County fully supports your request to Alberta Health to provide Frontier Diagnostics with a contract for a CT interpretation fee and operational fee. The alternative wording that administration drafted is on behalf of the Wheatland County Council, I would like to extend our sincere thanks for your informative presentation on November 19th, 2024. Wheatland County fully supports the initiative to enhance the availability of radiology and diagnostic imaging services in our region. And our current motion that is on the table is to direct administration to draft a letter to Frontier Diagnostics as per their request. So I guess council has an opportunity to discuss and see if we can either come to consensus around the draft letter, or we can have a vote on a version of the letter and go from there. Council's wishes. Councillor Kester?
I'll move the one where the first paragraph says, on behalf of Wheatland County Council, I would like to extend our sincere thanks for your informative presentation on November 19th, 2024. Wheatland County fully supports your request to Alberta Health to provide Frontier Diagnostics with a contract for CT interpretation fee and operation fee, and the rest, I believe, is the same.
Thank you, Councillor Kester. So the motion that's on the table will be referring to the letter that Councillor Kester just read the language from. Any questions or discussion? Councillor Laprise.
So now that I see two letters in front of us, I prefer the second letter because we aren't prescribing what we want Alberta Health to do. We're just saying that we support, and it was a request for a letter of support. So I think the second one addresses that without trying to overstep our reach into provincial jurisdiction.
Deputy Reeve Clausen.
I have similar thoughts to Councillor Laprise. She said it better than me, but it gives the same letter without specifics, in my opinion.
Yeah, I would echo the comments that have been made. I can't support the motion that's on the floor, but I would certainly support a second motion providing a letter of support that does not endorse a specific private entity in terms of the project. I do have one, if this, well, we'll go there after. Any other questions or discussion on the motion that's on the table? I'll call the question. Certainly. That motion fails with Link, Eichert, Clausen, and Laprise voting opposed, Kester and Laursen voting in favor.
I would like to make a motion that we send the second letter and approve the Reeve to sign it. Sorry, for the Reeve to sign it and for us to send that second letter. indicating support for radiology and diagnostic imaging services addressed to Frontier Diagnostics.
Thank you, Councillor Laprise. Any questions or discussion on the motion? I would just ask for, so one specific revision, and then administration had indicated that there might be just a few textual amendments, just where we've made statements that say would, that we maybe don't have the subject matter expertise to say so declaratively, to just say could or may. We could leave it to administration's discretion to just revise the wording, not changing the intent or the the meaning of the letter. My request for a minor amendment to the draft would just be in the second sentence, Wheatland County fully supports. My preference would be to use the word any initiative to enhance the availability. So for example, if there was an opportunity to bring an MRI machine or something beyond the scope of the initial presentation, rather than the initiative, which would just limit the scope to what was presented. It's just a little bit more broader support. Not a change to the motion, but just a potential amendment to the draft letter that was circulated.
I don't have a problem with that. I think it's good that any initiative is not specific. So maybe they will have something else in their side pocket that works with that too. So.
Any other questions or discussion regarding the motion? So everybody, trying to think procedurally, we don't always approve the final letter. We just approve a letter and then administration typically drafts it in alignment with the intent. So does anybody object to administration just making a couple of textual amendments and then with that revision to the word any without changing the intent of the letter?
No objections.
Any other questions or discussion regarding the motion? I'll call the question. That motion is carried. I believe that brings us to the conclusion of our agenda and meeting is adjourned. Thanks, everybody.